2 weeks ago, I was lucky enough to ride Epcot's new for 2022 roller coaster, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. This new attraction is an epic addition to Epcot and really to all of Walt Disney World, and I don't typically do review videos like this, but I felt compelled to do a quick review for this coaster. So just a little bit of background on the attraction itself. This ride has been hyped up for quite some time now. It was originally slated to be open in 2021, I believe, but of course due to the pandemic, the coaster was delayed about a year. It opened to the public on Friday, May 27th of Memorial Day weekend, with cast member previews and annual pass holder previews preceding that for about the month and a half prior. But I was fortunate enough to spend a day at Epcot on my honeymoon, actually 2 days, just about 3 weeks after the opening date. The coaster itself is first of its kind from Vekoma, and actually the first coaster to be installed at Epcot. Both Disney and Vekoma have been billing this as the Omni Coaster attraction, which is similar to a spinning coaster, but it doesn't necessarily spin on its own. It actually points you directionally towards the scenes and all the different action that's taking place in the gigantic show building behind the attraction's entrance. It is also Disney's first ever reverse launch coaster, and I'm not sure if that's exactly true. I guess it may be, but it is a crazy sensation, and I'll kind of get to that a little bit later in this review. So over the 2 days that I spent at Epcot, I was lucky enough to ride this attraction 3 different times, once with a virtual queue and twice with an individual lightning lane purchase. So as of the release of this video in June 2022, they are not doing a standby queue for this attraction, which can be very annoying, and I understand the frustration there, especially with the virtual queue system. The things are sold out in a matter of minutes, but thankfully the lightning lane seems to have somewhat reasonable availability. I was able to get one for each day of my trip, and I wasn't even staying on property or anything like that, so I didn't have priority access to it. But the virtual queue system is really a toss-up, and I was just lucky enough to get it. You do have to have an Epcot park reservation to be able to get into the virtual queue, so that's definitely something to note. So moving on to the aesthetics of the building itself, I never actually got to ride the preceding attraction, Ellen's Energy Adventure, but the work Disney did to revamp this entrance and this entire plaza here is fantastic. It looks beautiful. The Novacore ship in front of the building is incredible, and it just looks super sleek and futuristic and really fits in with the overall vibe of Epcot. I do know the Disney purists are a bit upset about bringing another IP into Epcot, but I do think this one fits, and the ride is just so good that it doesn't really bother me that much. Heading on into the queue, I don't want to spoil too much, but the first queue room is really awesome. It has a really clever and quite funny looped video that displays on the ceiling overhead as you're waiting. And from there you move up into another part of the queue that has some pretty unique and awesome, almost museum-like models of some of the different Guardian ships, and it really just serves to build the hype even more. After making it through the main queue, you're fed into 2 different pre-shows, the first of which is pretty standard, but the second has some very unique and pretty mind-blowing effects and, different scenes and things like that I was not expecting in the slightest. From there, you're led down a long hallway and eventually down to the dual loading platform where you get on the coaster. The Guardians coaster trains are 5 cars, each with 2 rows, and for the 3 rides that I was able to get on, I rode the middle of the train twice and then row 10 for my last ride. Row 10 being the very back of the train. The cast members were awesome enough to honor our request for the back row, but in particular I would recommend row 9 if you're able to. And I'll explain why that's the preferred row here just in a second. After being sent off, you head into a few different show scenes prior to the actual roller coaster section of the ride. This really does help to flesh out the story of the coaster a bit more, which is pretty easy to follow. It's pretty much your typical amusement park plotline. Something goes wrong, you're here to save the day, boom, that's exactly what happens. Now here's why I would prefer row 9. When you enter the reverse launch section of the coaster, row 9 is actually the very last row of the train. So you're facing backwards, and although it is quite dark, you can see the track zooming underneath you, which is pretty wild. Again, without getting into too much detail, the coaster itself is fantastic. There are some great forces in there, particularly in the back, as I mentioned. The reverse launch itself is really sweet. It seems like it has some nice acceleration. It's pretty forceful, and it really just catapults you into the show building. The ride has some great pops of airtime throughout, a couple of forceful helixes mixed in. The ride itself seems pretty long, and the show elements really pull it all together. There's so many different things to look at while you're on the coaster. It's kind of like a different experience every time you ride it. Speaking of a different experience each time you ride, there are actually 6 different on-ride audio tracks that are played randomly each time you will ride the attraction. These songs are September by Earth, Wind & Fire, Disco Inferno by The Tramps, Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears, One Way or Another by Blondie, I Ran by A Flock of Seagulls, and Conga by Gloria Stefan. For my 3 rides, I got Everybody Wants to Rule the World, I Ran, and Conga, and each brought a different energy, and I thought they all matched perfectly with the layout of the coaster. So wrapping it all up in my final thoughts, I think this is a tremendous addition for Epcot. I really loved it, and I think the average guest will love it as well. It is a bit similar to some of the other Disney coasters on Walt Disney World property. You know, you of course have the indoor show building like Space Mountain. You've got the launch, which is similar to Rock and Roller Coaster at Hollywood Studios. And then there's Tron, which is going to be, you know, somewhat similar as well. But I think Guardians has enough going for it to separate itself. For the average Disney park goer, I don't think they're really going to care. The ride is thrilling, the queue is incredible and makes the wait so much better. And it's just another high capacity ride that Epcot desperately needed. So I'm not going to give it a number rating or anything, but it is for sure my favorite Disney coaster that they've ever built. And I'm super excited to get back to Epcot in the fall to ride it a couple more times. So that's it. Those are my thoughts. If you've ridden this attraction and feel differently, please let me know in the comments down below. If you haven't ridden just yet and you're hyped to get on it, let me know as well. I'm always excited to hear from new people. With that, that's all I have today. Be sure to subscribe to follow along. I'll have plenty more videos like this coming up in the future. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.